politicians are also different. There are differences and there are similarities. And therefore, position your ideas and your recommendations accordingly. Right? Your thought process of why you're doing something might be X, but doesn't mean that always it kind of has to go out as X. So X is there, but then you can always explain it in a manner that it's more understandable. Right? That's one. Secondly, what we have learned over the years is that politicians have a very good ear to the ground. They know the pulse of people. They know what's happening on the ground. That's expected of a politician. Now, you can give a very analytical explanation of how or why something should be done, versus you explain it through a story of a citizen or story of a user. Right? That is what sticks with them a lot more. Right? So there's some girl called this staying in this village. This is how the current life looks like. If we do this, this is how the life will change. That's a much better presentation to them, as opposed to saying there are 3 things that we should do to improve education, 1, 2, 3, and so this element in communication, basically, that's there. Also, the other thing we keep in mind is election cycles in our work. So we would typically not start a systemic transformation in a state 1 year into elections. We would not do that because we know the political relationship can potentially change. There can be a huge reshuffle in the state and so on. So we need a certain runway to do deep reforms. And that can only happen when there is politically there is stability in the state, right? So that's another thing that we factor in terms of timing.
True, sir. So I think so now we are, okay, we have one more question. Given how public-private partnerships are being leveraged for change as well, does governance consulting also have a space here?
Yes, so public-private partnership is a very, I think things have moved far from when this term first came into being 20 years back. So yes, public-private partnerships are leveraged everywhere these days for impact, for change. And yes, governance consulting has a clear role to play there as well. Answer to is basically yes. There is, yeah, and it's very, very common these days.
Hi guys, this is Nikhil here.
So I think so we are finally done with the questions.
Topic name is wrong.
And it was a great session. And especially the part about growing as an entrepreneur and keeping a checkpoint every 6 months at least to see that you are growing is really good.
I'll just put the
I think so we can keep the checkpoint at 1 month as well, because related to startups we see that every day something new happens. One learns something new every day.
Right. So can you change the
6 months
topic
is
that
quite
the old
you
topic
can learn everything in 1 month itself.
Every day you learn all the time. 6 months.
Marketing and privacy first.
Fundamentally changed as evolved as a professional, evolved as a leader. That's this. I'll just add one more thing, Sweetie, before we close.
Yes.
I think those of you are thinking, and some of you might be on the edges, right? Might be on the fence, whether you want to do entrepreneurship, you don't want to do entrepreneurship, you want to work, you don't want to. A lot of things that kind of goes on in one's mind at that. The only one thing I'll not say do it today or do it tomorrow, but sooner the better is what I would say. And even if you want to get some experience before you kind of take the plunge, make sure the person you're working with, your manager matters more than your company, than your anything. The person you're working with is the most important thing. Somebody who can teach you how to do things well. I think that's the most important, best training that you can get than any brand name, than anything else if you want to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Hi, Nikhil. We have these. Just take one. It looks fine.
Yeah. One second. I'm just checking. Yeah, perfect. I think Abhinay is also waiting on the link. Abhinay is also in the waiting room. If you could let him enter.
Yeah. Welcome, Abhinay. I will just.
Yeah, perfect.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah,
I think
can hear
Abhinay is
you
also
fine.
waiting
I
on
will
the
just
link.
request some time because our previous session was on.
Abhinay is also in the
Just give us
waiting
some
room. If you
time.
could let him
Participants
enter.
will be joining.
Hi, Abhinay. How you doing?
Hi, doing good.
Great to have you here finally.
I know.
Looking forward to the session. So I think we'll wait for another 5-10 minutes, just let more people come in, and I think then they'll take over and start the session.
Welcome, Abhinay.
Cool, done.
I will just.
Do you want to do like
Yeah, I can hear you fine. I will just request some
to see
time
if you guys
because our
can see
previous
the
session was
screen if
on.
I'm sharing it?
Just give us some
that's
time.
all.
Participants will be joining.
Okay.
Yeah, just give me a second.
Yeah, how you doing? Make him the co-host.
Hi, doing good.
As well. Great to have you here finally.
Yeah, I know.
Looking forward to the session. So I think we'll wait for another 5-10 minutes, just let more people come in, and I think then they'll take over and start the session.
Yeah, I think you should be able to see it now.
Yes, sir.
Do you want to do like a test? I'm just gonna to see if you guys can see the screen if I'm sharing it.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I'll stop sharing.
Just give me a second.
Okay. Yeah, I think you'll have to make him the co-host.
Cool. So I'm ready whenever you guys are. Yeah.
So I think you can turn off your video and then they'll introduce you. Then you can come back in.
Yeah. I was gonna do that only.
Yes, Abhinav. Please try now.
Yeah, I think you should be able to see it now.
Yes, sir. We can see it.
Okay, cool. I'm just gonna transition a slide. Okay, works. Cool. I'll stop share.
Great.
Cool. So I'm ready whenever you guys are.
So I think you can turn off your video and then they'll introduce you. Then you can come back in.
Yeah. I was gonna do that only.
Perfect.
Hi all, sorry for the delay. We had our previous session ongoing, that's why the delay. I welcome you all. Warm welcome to the Genesis presented by Sorry for the delay in association with Data. We had our It is a great pleasure for me to introduce our speaker for today, Mr. Bhasin, who is going to talk to us about marketing in a privacy-first world. Let me introduce our speaker first. So, Abhinay is the Vice President of Data Sciences, Asia Pacific at Dentsu International. He is a strong research professional with a master's degree focused in MSc Economics from University of Warwick. He has won numerous industry awards recognizing top talents in the region, such as the Impact 30 Under 30, the Social Samosa Top 30 Under 30, Leaders of Tomorrow, and was even featured in 2019 Forbes 30 Under 30 list. He was also Asia's sole nominee for New Talent in UK's prestigious DataIQ Award in 2018. Thank you so much, sir, for agreeing to come here. I'm sure that we all will be benefited from your session. Before starting this session, I would just like to present a small video from our sponsors. So sit back and just enjoy this video.
Mom told me, अगर job नहीं लगी ना, तो शादी करा देंगे. Thanks to Hirect, where I could directly chat with the startup founders and get a job I deserve.
Okay. Those were our sponsors hiring. Now I would like to welcome our speaker for today, Mr. Abhinav, to start the session. So please, the stage is yours.
Awesome. Firstly, I want to thank you guys for having me over today. I think a topic that we're going to talk about today, marketing in a privacy first world, is fundamental to how the ad industry has actually moved and transformed today. With that, let me actually share my screen. I'm going to keep this as fluid as we can. I think you guys should be able to see my screen now. Yeah, can you guys see my screen? Okay, cool. So I think you guys have actually given a great introduction to me, but let me just give you like a quick background. I work with this company called Dentsu, where I currently invest my time in. I've actually co-founded this data sciences team. And essentially what we do as a data sciences team is we're more like a startup within a large enterprise. We're a product company that builds products in advertising to help brands connect with their audiences a lot better. What we really did also, I think not so long ago, is we wrote an industry white paper called Marketing in the Privacy First World. And where that really came from, and I think why it's most relevant today, is the fact that the way advertising itself is run is completely transformed. You're more digital. We're allowing ourselves also to give a lot more of our information up online, and we're constantly being targeted by brands. So digital advertising is a no-brainer that it's actually taking the lion's share of where advertising really happens. And what's really happened over the course of time is that people have become more aware of their individual rights to privacy. And what that has really done is that it's forced companies like Facebook, like Google, like Apple to actually take some changes in their environment to give out lesser and lesser of information. And that's where the entire world of advertising in many ways is in a bit of a tizzy, because it's going to change the way fundamentally brands reach out to their audiences. While before I go into or deeper into what I'm going to talk about today, I think it's relevant that we look at what the fundamentals of advertising really are. And if you see every single campaign, every single advertising message, what is it really trying to do? Is that it's trying to change what people know or associate with a brand, so that people either want it more or value it more highly, or ideally both, right? So if you think of like what Nike does, let's say, for example, in any of its communication, they never really talk about a shoe. They talk more about a vision. They talk about just do it. They talk about a philosophy. And by that, what they're actually being successful in doing is that they're generating the fact that Nike is such a great company. Why as a user, I would like to have whatever product that they have. So they obviously would make the world's best shoes. And so you value it more, and then you want it more as well, right? And that's essentially what advertising is trying to do. And it's also trying to reach out to the right audience at the right time and in the right place. So much so that advertisers in the last year alone spent $650 billion just in the fact of trying to get to their right audience. And to reach the right audience, what they look at a lot is pieces of information about that audience that is available in the realm of digital, to make sure that they know a lot about their customers. What's really happened, and more pronounced in the lockdown world of COVID-19, is that there have been many players that have actually emerged there, where audiences actually invest a lot of their time. So for example, if you look at our own consumption habits, we now spend a lot of time on OTT platforms. We binge watch a lot on Netflix, on Prime, on any of those platforms. So they've emerged as platforms to have a lot of information about audiences. We shop more on e-commerce as well, right? So essentially, we buy more on Amazon, we buy more on Flipkart. We're investing a lot of our efforts in sort of buying more online and being more virtually connected. Facebook is today talking about metaverse and a completely digital reality. And what's that really created in many ways is that it's created something called a fragmented identity world. And what that really means is that there is no single platform that now has a lot of information about you, but many platforms owning different parts of your life. So most recently, you would have seen Spotify did that entire wrapped up year for a lot of us, right? And that actually showed us how much our audience profile out there actually showed us how much of information they know about our consumption habits on music around there, and what sort of audio files are we. Netflix today knows what is the next likely show that you're going to have, right? So there are a lot of these companies now that have a lot of these pieces of information, and that's actually created like a distorted view of a customer, because today if a brand has to reach out to an audience, there is no single place that they can go to that knows absolutely everything about audiences. Now, what's really happened because of these multiple, let's say, walled gardens or places of information, of audience information that exist, is that they rely fundamentally on each of them storing a lot of information about us. And that's what a cookie actually is in the realm of digital, right? It's basically a piece of code that is dropped on your device, which is either a mobile or a desktop, and it sort of gathers information about how you're sort of traversing through the internet, how you're consuming a lot more content, and it's constantly storing that somewhere so that tomorrow, if let's say Nike wants to advertise to people who are running enthusiasts and they reach out to Times of India can automatically say that I have, let's say, so many millions of people who consume a lot of sports content. And that's where cookies are really used. It's actually the backbone of advertising, because the only way that these large tech companies, even Facebook and Google, do make a lot of money is by monetizing their audiences. And that's what every single player today in the realm of ad tech actually talks about. Now, what's really happened, and I will brush you through a quick changes of context to set some context, is basically people have become more aware of their fundamental rights and the way that their information is actually being used. So if you look at where this entire thing started, is it actually started off with first Apple making some changes in Safari to introduce privacy first protocols. And then consumers in Europe actually started being more self-aware of their rights and the fact that all these large companies just advertise to them without taking permission. That's where laws like GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, actually came out, which actually told the rest of the world that, listen, you got to ask people their information before you target through them. And what that really triggered off is a series of changes in the internet where Facebook, Apple, Google, all of them pretty much started making changes in the environment to adhere to these laws. What then happened once those laws became more prominent, and it still continues to evolve, is a lot of these big tech companies, like I said, like Apple, Google, Firefox, all of them started tightening up the amount of information. Firstly, they let out of information, and they focus more on consent-based marketing of asking every individual user whether they had the permission to sort of use their information for a purpose of marketing. And today you see that in whenever you log on to a website or you sign up to a new thing, it often asks you information now of can I use your data for a specific purpose? But those changes actually still impact a lot of what's going on, and the ecosystem is still evolving. Google most recently on March 31st said that it's going to deprecate third-party cookies, which means that the entire piece of information that it used to let out to others to sort of build more intelligence over, they said suddenly that they're going to stop passing on user information beyond their platform. Apple also did that. They, in fact, went on to an extreme to actually say that every single processing of individual information is only going to happen on their devices and it's not going to move out of their devices. So that created even more stress in the ecosystem, because today brands and advertisers were suddenly left with having very little use of data because of these changing norms, and now you couldn't even market to audiences that they really had, right? So people till today are very much confused in terms of where the ecosystem is headed because of a lot of these changes in the environment, and that's why the entire concept of marketing in a privacy world, first world, has actually emerged. Now, those changes by Google and Apple actually rippled into every single advertising tech or a publisher like Facebook that you can actually think of, right? So a lot of log level data processing, a lot of audience intelligence, in a way stopped being created, or there are like huge regulations now in the way these companies operate. And these, we're talking about millions and billions of dollars invested into these companies to actually help brands understand their audiences. So this created an entire ripple effect in the world of ad tech. And if I had to take like a speculative look forward into how the industry is progressing, we're seeing the emergence of a lot more of these privacy-centric laws like GDPR. In fact, India is having a bill that is tabled to be passed in Parliament that focuses on consumer data and consumer data protection. Google across Android has actually followed Apple to say that they're going to have anonymized or random device IDs that they're going to create on their phones to again make it harder for brands to know whether a particular targeting on a platform is actually working or not. So they've actually followed a lot of what Apple has done. So what this entire thing has done is that it's created tremendous pressure on the fact of how data is collected and used in the ecosystem. Now, a quick snapshot in terms of the types of data. So you have first party data, which is data that is owned by a brand or a company directly. So let's say if you're ICICI Bank and you ask people to come onto your website to fill a particular form for, let's say, opening a new bank account, that becomes first party data that you own directly. Second party data is that, let's say if ICICI Bank now uploads their data into Facebook and says that I want to find more people who signed up into this lead form, so help me find people that look like that. That partnership that ICICI Bank will make with Facebook is known as second party data. And then third party data is, let's say if Facebook uses that data that ICICI Bank gave it and then partnered with, let's say, a BMW to say that I want you to now tell me from ICICI Bank's customers which ones are having a potential of owning luxury cars or are likely to sign up for a test drive, then that becomes third-party intelligence that you're building off second-party data. And what's really happened now with all these privacy changes is that the third-party data match is no longer going to happen. Second-party data comes under more scrutiny and more pressure in terms of how data partnerships are made. And then people now have to actually focus on strengthening their first-party data. What's happened and why we call these as walled garden ecosystems is that they're large repositories of audience information in themselves, right? Like Google knows literally everything about us. Facebook knows our consumption habits of the kind of content that we use in the social platform. And Amazon knows our purchase history and a lot of that. And why they're called walled gardens is because they don't share information about people with themselves. And why that's probably a good thing is because it actually helps safeguard your data within their ecosystems. But it's bad for advertisers because suddenly when they're trying to reach out to, let's say me, if Nike had to reach out to me, I would be a different audience for them on Google, on Facebook, and on Amazon as well. So what's happened with all these changes is that the walls of the walled garden ecosystem have actually been raised higher. There's lesser information shared about, and there's more wastage in the entire economy. And this what the changes that Facebook and Google, while they have massive amounts of information, it is more or less fine for them. But a lot of smaller publishers like, let's say, lesser than Times of India, maybe a smaller newspaper, or let's say a blog site and stuff like that, which people used to try to monetize their content to sort of fund their activities, that actually has thrown a lot of them into tizzy as well. And you're talking about companies that could even be like, let's say, Economic and Political Weekly, a magazine publication that actually funds themselves through ads, right? So you're looking like a lot of these actually being under question, because now there's not much information for them to monetize their audiences about. And what will really happen is that you're going to have a lot more of these fragmented troves of audiences that I was talking about earlier. You're already seeing Jio strike a partnership with pretty much any large content provider, or even they're into retail, they're into so many other places where they collect and keep a lot more information about them. So you're going to have more Jios of the world sort of emerge. You're seeing Airtel do it. You're seeing Vodafone Idea do it, right? They're coming up with their own streaming platforms also, so that they keep you engaged and they keep getting more information and insights about you. And what that's going to create, again, is going to create further fragmentation, that you're not going to be able to have that single audience picture in one place. Different places are going to have different pieces of understanding about you as an audience. And I think what I've spoken about in the time that we've had so far is that it might appear that the entire ecosystem is in complete disarray, is that everything is lost. We're talking about changes in the ecosystem that are happening as dynamic as they can. We're talking about fragmented audiences, the fact that you no longer can understand a consumer behavior at a journey level. You're talking about the emergence of neo walled gardens, and you're talking about like the death of third-party cookies, which has actually created this entire storm in the world of advertising. So it might actually appear that we're in a doomsday scenario, and a lot of people have spoken about it as like the cookie apocalypse and the death of digital advertising and so on and so forth. I actually think that we're in a golden era of marketing, and that's what marketing in a privacy-first world is going to be all about. What I really dub it as the age of connected intelligence. And that is going to be primarily driven by two things: the sheer volume of data and the ability to process that data to make sense of that data. Talking about the sheer volume of data, I think it's a no-brainer. We're generating a lot more information in the span of a minute. So this is like a snapshot of what happens in an internet minute. You're talking about 500 hours of content being uploaded onto YouTube, 28,000 people who are actively watching Netflix at any given time. So it's like a sheer phenomenal scale at which has never happened before. And every year I keep looking at this graph, and it keeps growing up into millions in terms of the amount of information that we create. So there's a lot more data that is actually available to give you insights into different parts of an audience life. And the second thing is the ability to process that information, right? And if you just look at the cloud computing market, and I've taken USA as a country an example, it's actually gone up by an average growth rate across years of 20-30%, right? And it's going to hit like a 160-170 billion dollar industry. It's already hit 160 billion by the end of 2020. By 2021, it's going to continue on its growth of 20 to 25%. And if you see the fundamental, so it's not just the ability to process that, but a lot of companies are now investing into understanding audiences better and strengthening their first and second party data that I referred to in an earlier slide in this presentation, right? So they're investing more, advertisers are investing more in understanding audiences better, in being able to create personalized relationships with their audiences. And that's been a primary focus of these brands in terms of trying to reach out to audiences. So while people think like the entire plot is lost, and that the deprecation of third-party cookies is probably going to be a doomsday for the entire realm of advertising, I actually think that there are still three ways to understand audiences better, which a lot of brands still use today, and a lot of them are making its comeback. So the first is something called identity-based marketing. The next is cohort-based marketing, and Google has come up with solutions around them. And the third is context or contextual-based advertising. Talking very briefly about identity-based marketing. Identity-based marketing is more of understanding an audience at an individual level, knowing exactly who Abhinay Bhasin really is, knowing that he is the same customer on Netflix, on Google. So trying to reach out to this person at an individual one-on-one level. That's what identity means. And there are several providers that have actually emerged and have become stronger in this entire phase of advertising. So that's what identity-based marketing really is. The second is cohort-based advertising. And what that really means is that instead of following an individual, you start following groups of people. So I want to find people like Abhinay who are interested in Nike, who are interested in running, who are interested in outdoor activities. And I want to reach out to groups of people like him instead of focusing on reaching out to him at an individual level. That's what cohort-based solutions are all about. And Google has actually introduced a new way of advertising on web, primarily driven by what they call as FLoC, or federated learning of cohorts, which means that it focuses on understanding the behavior of a group rather than an individual interaction. And that is something that a lot of companies are actually looking at as a solution to reaching out to audiences today and understanding audiences better. And the third thing and last thing is called contextual advertising. So instead of following an individual or their behavior, I look at the reason why a person has entered a particular website. So I follow a context, and I look at and I analyze that not just behaviorally, but in terms of how they're consuming content, to bucket them in a particular group, and then advertise to them. And that's contextual based advertising. So I know whether a person has come where he's just browsing or he's actually interested in a particular thing, and then you can advertise to them in a better way. And that's what contextual solutions really are all about. And lastly, I think before I close my presentation, and hopefully keeping to time so that there is room for questions if you all have any, I actually feel that this entire new way of consent-based marketing, the entire idea of focusing so much on consumer privacy and individual rights, is actually the chance that the world has to rebuild the internet the right way, to focus on customer experiences, but also customer privacy at the same time. And I feel we're hence in a golden era of advertising, because this is really the best moment to build it. We have all the technology, we have the brightest of minds, and we have all the capabilities around it. So all is actually not lost from that point of view. With that, I'd like to thank you for listening to me in the half an hour or so that we spoke, and I'm going to keep the floor open in case y'all have any questions. Thanks. You're on mute, I think.
Oh, I'm so sorry. So thanks a lot, Abhinay sir, for giving us all the insights, the industry insights. The forum is open for question and answers. We have started receiving some questions from the chat. I would like to read them. So
Sure.
First question is from Kalpana. A confusion: how is cohort-based solutions different given even today's data has no identifiers? Slightly unclear.
Okay, so I think that's a great fundamental question. Today's data does have identifiers. So it's not that people are not storing your email IDs in some database and stuff like that. So cohort-based solution is more of, I don't want to reach out to an individual email ID, or I don't want to reach out to, let's say, a phone number as a text-based marketing. It's more to look at people who've given consent that, okay, you can advertise to me for a particular solution, and then find groups of people like that individual person. So it's not so much looking at Kalpana's email ID and then shooting out an email to Kalpana, but it's trying to reach Kalpana on Facebook and find a lot of people like her. And that's what cohort-based solution is, where you look at an individual, but try to find like thousands more that represent the behavior of that individual, and then reach out to them as messages. I hope that was better expressed. Good question.
So just a follow-up question from my side. As you said,
Sure.
we will not just market to Kalpana, but we will cluster and find more people like Kalpana. So if you can give some parameters, how do you make those clusters?
Sorry, so those parameters is what Facebook generates within its ecosystem. So on every single individual, they have more than 34,000 attributes that they tag. So I would actually look at how Kalpana is across all those attributes. And then through my entire warehouse of, let's say if I'm Facebook or I'm Google, then I know how many people are very similar to her behavior or your behavior in that case, and then reach out and then bucket them and then reach out to them if I wanted to reach, if I was a brand who was reaching out to Kalpana. And that's how that cohort-based marketing actually works that way.
Yeah, understood. So another question, the second question is also about a bit more clarification based on the understanding building. So Kalpana is unclear about on the concepts on contextual based and cohort based marketing. So both of this, they do rely on data as well. So could you elaborate on the difference that makes it more privacy oriented? We are still making note on online behaviors, other data, etc.
Yeah, I think that's a great question because a lot of people get confused between cohort and contextual. So cohort is finding groups of people, like I said, in terms of express behaviors, like how Facebook really does. Contextual based advertising is how do people consume content and then get bucketed under a particular topic. So if I'm, let's say, reading a lot of articles across the web on sports, I'm a huge F1 fan and I'm reading a lot of information about that. Tomorrow, an automobile company might actually want to reach out to me in the context that this person is an avid Formula One fan, most likely interested in cars, and then how do I reach out to them as an individual? And where cohort-based and contextual-based advertising really are stronger, and like I said, is like a more improved way of reaching out to audiences, is that it focuses on consent-based marketing. And what consent-based marketing is that every time you sign into a website today or you visit a website, it actually sends you a message saying that will you accept these cookies? These cookies are going to be used for either marketing or understanding better or analysis and stuff like that. So a person's individual record is stored in the servers of Google and Facebook or that website only after you have given consent. Earlier in when you used to use the internet, you never had to give this permission ever. And today you are actually made to give that permission. And cohort-based and contextual-based actually look at that permission and then say that, okay, cool, I think Kalpana has given me permission, so I can now reach out to her with an ad that I think is relevant for her. I hope that was clear. I think it's great to ask and clarify these fundamentals because a lot of people today in advertising just talk about these terms without deep practical understanding of that. And that actually influences the way you're going to enter your careers into wherever sector that you do. But reaching out to audiences is, or trying to sell a product or a service is going to be what largely a lot of you all invest your time in. And the ecosystem is completely evolving. So it's very important to understanding these changes in the environment so that you gear up for it.
Thanks for that explanation. Next question is from Divya. If asks, how should a company market while being mindful of privacy? The starting, middle, and end to evolve with the consumer almost always seem to end up at data.
Yeah, so that's true, right? So what are we talking about in a privacy first world? You're talking about themes like consent. You're talking about themes like building your first party data on the backbone of consent. And that's exactly what brands need to do. So whether you're a startup trying to reach out to an audience, or you're a direct to customer company like a Nika who's trying to find out who the next person is going to be interested in beauty and fashion and stuff like that, it's all about firstly building up your own understanding, not relying so much on information that is just out there, but building your own audience intelligence in the right way, which is why I ended my entire presentation with the fact that we have this opportunity to understand our audiences at a fundamental level, keeping their privacy in mind. And that's what the entire world of advertising, or rather the regulations have shifted and focused to get the world of advertising to actually put a lot of pressure on, to focus on consent-based marketing in the way of in the way of building up your first party data. So the backbone of advertising is still going to be data driven. You're only going to see tech and ad tech continue to proliferate. You're going to see a lot more investments in that area, but it's about how you make use of that information and safeguard individual rights at the same time.
Next question is from Naira. She asks, if you can please elaborate on scalable ways to reach out to people who are willing to give consent.
Right. So I think that's what I focused on in terms of the 3 ways of reaching out to audiences, right? You have your identity led, where people have actually given their consent for you to store their information in your own database, and you reach out to them at a one-on-one level. You have cohort based, which actually focuses on groups of people. And then you have contextual that follows people who come in with a particular context or a topic classification, right? So those are the 3 fundamental ways. And I think that will pretty much cover the realm of all your businesses. You have Facebook and Google who adapt to both identity as well as cohort, as well as contextual also, actually, right? So the rest of Google Web is pretty much contextual advertising. So you have these companies that are already invested in creating these technologies to reach out to audiences. So those are ways to reach out to audiences in scalable ways. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah. So we have received a clarification question on this from Naira. She asked,
sure,
how do you implement the solution? If you can give some examples and elaborate.
Sorry, how do you?
Like, how do you implement the solution?
Oh, how do you implement them? I think a lot of, if you look at what ad tech and martech is really focused on, right? Today, it's about creating these systems. So you have your CRM systems where today, if let's say I signed up to ICICI Bank's website, my information is stored in a database which is called your CRM, right? Primarily, that essentially is the technology under which all your individual records are stored, where brands continue to build more intelligence about you. So you could imagine that Facebook, like Netflix, like Google, will actually be storing a lot of your individual interactions with them in these databases. So that's already in place in terms of reaching out to audiences. Now you have a new filter in terms of whether you've given consent or not. And then it's just about subsetting or filtering that to reach out to or to monetizing that data from an advertising point of view. So it's about, so these systems are already in existence, and now brands are focusing more in terms of strengthening this out so that they reach out to audiences effectively.
One query from my side, that how do we educate the audience about this content part? There's much reservation about sharing the data in general from public. So how do we educate the masses?
So I actually think that firstly, a lot of even government organizations are doing some of it, but of course at a larger scale, but much smaller measure. So there are, if it's just about us going up to websites to being more aware in terms of how they're actually using our information. Informations are probably available on your government websites as well, but I think it's a very tricky issue to address, right? So in Europe, the only way GDPR came into force is because citizens got together, said that, listen, I think our data is just being profiteered without our consent. And that's how GDPR and stuff like that evolved. So it came more from citizen awareness and citizen activism that actually related in that law, right? But today, I think as a user, we very easily just sort of hit that I accept all terms and conditions and download an app or go ahead with a website, right? Now you should actually know that you have 4 or 6 other items that you can actually select, and you can actually decide what you can allow that company to do with your data. So it's more about you being aware as a user of a particular platform or service to know how your information is going to be used.
That's interesting, sir. But we have one question from Krishna. As you mentioned that there is a lot amount of data, integration is there and all. So his question goes like, with the technology growing rapidly and knowing that everyone has access to the same set of data set, how can a startup make sure they use it efficiently to benefit them? How to choose which framework model to go with?
Right. So I think startups have an inherent advantage that they don't sort of have legacy systems in place, and they can actually build everything anew and afresh, right? And what startups should actually keep into consideration is they'll by default, because they want to build a leaner team, they'll want to piggyback on a lot of intelligence. They'll want to use a lot of tech to sort of drive their services. So I think by default, startups are already doing that, right? They're already finding better ways to reach out to audiences. They themselves have a lot of information. So if you look at how Nika built itself up, it actually had you wanting to sign into their platform before you actually made up, or how Amazon does it, right? You can't purchase without signing in from that point of view, right? So it's just about having these right systems and processes, and a lot of reliance on technology, which you actually have capable of building in the best possible way, to then know more about your audiences and then reach out to them, just using platforms that have already built up audience intelligence a lot better. So it's monetizing your data by making partnerships with platforms like Facebook and Google that have already a lot of information, and then using that effectively.
That's interesting to listen to, but I'm not sure how easy it's to implement as it is here.
Okay, so yes, implement. So I just want to then address that a lot better. So implementation, it's about implementing that technology, right? So you have to. So definitely, if you run your own startup, you'll have to build those systems, or there are already systems that exist today. So you have Salesforce, that is the world's largest information management system that every company can adopt to for themselves, for their own data. So you have companies like this that already exist, and technology that already exists for you to subscribe to, and then build up to sort of then either, so you can connect Salesforce to Facebook advertising, you connect Salesforce to Google. So you already have those systems that talk to each other. So you just need to know which platform to sort of go into, and implementation is actually not much, because companies like Salesforce have actually built themselves on making them easier to use for everyday people.
Definitely, so that makes much more sense. Yeah. So going ahead, taking the next question. It is from Varun. So just give me a second. So next question goes. He is asking that for concept-based marketing, do you think the responsibility lies with us to first make consumers aware of the importance of privacy? We have been almost conditioned to becoming robotic about giving consent, with statements like "we need data to know this for betterment" and all. So specifically, opacity, since consumers don't know about the ramifications of online oversharing tangibly.
I think that's true, right? Because a lot of us haven't been made self-aware, especially, I mean, we're marketing students, we're advertising students from that realm, right? But the wider part of the world probably doesn't know about the implications of giving up their data. But whenever it comes to questions like this, or approaches like this, I really feel that there's a trade-off often, and that trade-off is actually between giving convenience versus having privacy on the other hand, right? And there are browsers like Brave, there are browsers like DuckDuckGo that actually exist, where they're headless browsers, and in a way what they really do is every time you sign on to a Brave or a DuckDuckGo and you search something, because it has no information about you, it gives you random search results. So if I typed in, let's say, jacket, I might actually get something unexpected as a search result. But why people still use, let's say, Chrome and Safari is that they store information about you and they give you a lot more convenience. So you're okay to make that a trade-off of giving your information, because at the end of the day, your experience is so much better, right? I would much rather have my assistant on my phone, which is probably Google enabled, to actually know when my next flight is, book my cab in advance, caution me on traffic for my next meeting and stuff like that, right? So we often give up a lot of this our own personal privacy in exchange for convenience at the end of the day. So while I agree with you that a lot of it actually does reside on us, fundamentally. But when it comes to us making that choice, we get into this trade-off of privacy versus convenience. And most often than not, I've seen people choose convenience over privacy.
So heading towards like closing the session, I will just take the last few questions. Maybe.
Sure.
So yeah, it is from Rutika. So given the legacy, firms might find it difficult to transition to this new model. Will we then have to live in the pockets that are privacy friendly or for certain segments?
So I think that's a good, interesting question. And like I said, right, the world of advertising rather is still evolving so much that people really don't know where things are headed. Google itself hasn't implemented all the changes that it said that it would. Apple itself is just constantly adding more privacy-centric measures, and that is actually still creating a tizzy in the world of ad tech, right? So the ecosystem is still fast evolving. Brands, to be honest, are still just figuring this out, and so also advertising agencies. So while there are approaches in terms of storing data, making use of it, and then reaching out to audiences effectively, there is still no way in terms of saying how is the ecosystem going to sort of look like tomorrow. So you can actually do the best that you can today with the information that you have. And yes, there will always be hybrid versions that exist of monetizing data, maximizing data, and reaching out to the right audiences using the intelligence that you derive from data. So there's no set recipe today, but it's only what you can do with the information that you have, that people are still learning and in this process of learning and evolving and adapting as we speak.
That's great, sir.
Good question.
Yeah, so towards the closing of the session, I am receiving just maybe one or two more questions. There's the follow-up question. That is technology going to drive this shift, or do you see a shift towards a more manual system of gathering on the ground data, keeping an ear on the ground, so to speak?
Okay, I think that's a good question. Technology is always going to enable you to sort of enhance your efforts in terms of also storing a lot more data. I mean, if you look at the way you spend your own time, you spend more of your time on digital platforms than you do in an offline world, right? But that's not to say that there is not going to be any, I mean, now because of COVID, the online activation or online data, offline data gathering is actually much reduced, because you maybe spend lesser times in malls where people used to get a lot of information from you. You probably have lesser of those offline engagements for people to get more or brands to get more understanding about you, right? So I think that's probably just driven right now by a COVID world. But essentially, if you look at, like I said, right, our own behaviors, we're consuming more OTT, we're consuming more gaming is something that is evolving a lot, and a lot of people are using that, right? So we're spending more time in that virtual world. So by default, a lot of that data collection is going to happen using technology rather than physical surveys that sort of happen.
Understood, sir. So like this is a very new topic and it is very intriguing. So if you can suggest us some good content to follow, or some thought leaders to follow upon, say, it will help our audience.
Yeah, I think actually that's good, because it's something that definitely you should keep a pulse of. Google, by the way, has blogs. Facebook has blogs. So you should read up. You'll often get a lot of changes that happen is our newsletters that you can sign up to on their blog site. So that is something that you should definitely look at. I think a lot of your trade publications in the world of advertising and media, things like Exchange for Media, Impact, and the rest of it, are also places, or even Campaign, are also places where you can get information. And if you're looking more of tech related stuff, looking at TechCrunch and platforms such as those are essentially where you'll know what's happening in the rest of the world in terms of these shifts in the entire ecosystem. So it's a combination of looking at platforms directly through their internal blogs that you can get access to. It's about looking at a mix of publications in tech and in advertising that will help you look at that. So, and I guess your thought leaders will probably emerge from those spaces as well. Pretty much the leaders the heads of technology, the heads of data, the heads of individual organizations are anyways people who are going to speak about it, are going to be people who are involved in some decisions. So you're going to see and follow them automatically.
Sure, sir. So these sources will also help us to be more educated about the topic. So in the best interest of the time, I would like to come towards the closure of our session. We have a small video from our sponsors. I would like them, all of you to enjoy that video.
Post a new job and receive responses within 5 minutes. For a verified recruiter, posting a job can be done with a click of a button. Recruiters don't have to wait for candidates to apply. Candidate profiles are recommended based on the job post, and recruiters can start communicating with the recommended candidates immediately after posting the job. Privacy of the users is also protected. Personal information like phone number, CVs are shared only with consent. The communication can either be initiated by the recruiter or the candidate. In my case, you can see within 5 minutes of posting the job, the recruiter could chat directly, receive responses quickly, and even schedule interviews with the candidates. Within a few minutes, the recruiter can start expecting more candidates to view the job post and reach out to them by initiating a chat conversation. Since Hirect is mobile first, responses pour in any time of the day as most people are within the vicinity of their phone. A few hours later, as you can see here, a product manager job post was added by me last night, and by morning I have already received 15 plus chat requests from job seekers. You can see that my feed is full of product managers from top institutes and companies as matched by the algorithm. I'm able to initiate a chat with them and receive a response quickly, as I can see their last active time as well. Recruiters can receive responses from job seekers irrespective of the time of day or even at night, as Hirect is mobile first, and this makes it very accessible to the users. Direct chat, mobile accessibility, instant response, matching algorithm, secured privacy makes it 5 times better product for recruiters.
Thanks a lot, sir. It was our honor to have you here today. We got to learn a lot of industry insights. Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks for all to join this session.
Thanks, guys. Cheers. Bye.
Nikhil, you are on mute, I guess.